We started this film, Homegrown, to better understand people who feel justified in using violence to achieve their political aims, particularly among a movement of people who are feeling increasingly dissatisfied with the ability of democracy to protect their interests. I'm Michael Premo. I'm an artist and journalist, and I'm the director and producer of Homegrown.
My name's Rachel Falcone. I'm also an artist and filmmaker, and I'm the producer of Homegrown. Michael and I have a long practice of covering social movements, almost 2 decades, and so we, went to rallies and protests and events and bars and restaurants and met people where they were at. And so that was kind of how we started. Michael started the project in 2018. And so we met Chris, Thad, and Randy. And there were different reasons why we were interested in working with each of them. Chris was interesting because he hadn't been really political before 2016. But we, throughout filming him, kind of saw him getting involved in groups and just increasingly becoming more and more radicalized. And, Chris also, you get to see in the film, is like an incredibly vulnerable person. And so he kind of wears his heart on his sleeve and really shares. And so really welcomed us in to his home and then in the streets to film him in action. Randy is an organizer, is one of the first person we met in 2019. And, it was just really interesting because he was organizing a local chapter of the Proud Boys in New York City, and just we got to see kind of behind the scenes how someone organizes.
And Thad was interesting to us because he represents this sort of multicultural participation that is happening in the conservative movement, which is often something that isn't well documented and talked about, but is an increasing reality that I think is really fascinating. Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like the documentarian's dilemma is the fact that our presence changes the dynamic. The fact that very often, particularly now in this moment, people are so hyper aware of their presence and their image, and are very often very keen to figure out how to manipulate their image and how to perform. But I think what works for us in our approach is that we spend so much time with people that they eventually sort of let down their guard and tell us who they really are. And I think that serves them as well in a way that really gives the world a picture of who they are.
Yeah, I mean, so we were prepared like we were prepared for every other rally. So we had, our bulletproof vests and our gas masks and our helmets. And, we went and we were with Chris the evening before. And, like Michael said, we tried to show in the film how public they were about their plans, including Chris's, to storm the Capitol. We woke up that morning and we wanted Chris to tell us when he was going to leave the hotel. And he called us from under the monument and was like, hey, bro, I'm here. I'm already here. Where are you? And so we raced to meet him. He was just, he was raring to go. And so
so excited.
He was so excited. And so we were just doing our best to catch up. Right. And so we followed him and we really try to show in the film kind of critical moments. So there's a couple, little moments where people mention the time, so that you can track kind of, Chris is like, it's 11:57, so that's when he got the message from the other Proud Boys that were gathered. And so, we started to see, and we really anticipated that there would be a police presence that would prevent any violence or anything from happening. And so that, that was what was most shocking, was just, not necessarily people's intention, which was kind of planned in the open, and we knew that that was going to happen, but just that there would be no force to stop it.
Yeah, it was January 6th. It was a funny day. There was a lot of highs and lows, frankly. There was moments where we were running into people that we had been filming with over the last several years and saying hello and talking and, seeing lots of people having fun, and then people sort of like turning their anger and rage and directing it on the building. And I think the one moment that we felt the most unsafe was in the tunnel. It was in the tunnel leading into the Capitol, and it was one of the kind of fiercest moments of hand-to-hand combat throughout the day. And we were pinned against the wall very briefly and kind of struggled to breathe. When you have a body plates on, it kind of compresses your whole chest, and we were kind of stuck against the wall for a few moments and couldn't breathe. And until I saw someone in the crowd who we had recognized from other protests, kind of saw what we were kind of stuck and in distress, and kind of helped us wiggle free and get out of that moment. But it was a scary brief second, and especially when you're wearing a gas mask, it's hard to breathe in general when you have a gas mask on, and so when you're gasping for air, it could feel a little desperate.
Yeah. There was another moment that I got gassed. The gas got into my mask. I think I had glasses that I had to put in the gas mask, and I was trying to put them in, and I got gassed. The gas got through, so I was completely blinded. So
I think your mask got full of gas, and then it went back on your face.
Yeah, and so Michael kind of helped guide me until I could see again. There were lots of hairy moments.
But also, I think it was really interesting to note that there was also moments where the crowd was laughing and having a lot of fun, and that's something I hadn't thought of happens at a riot. But it did. There was fathers and sons. We have one moment in the film where we're talking to a young man who's there with his father, and we actually had filmed a number of other moments throughout the day of that morning, right on the front lines, where it was a father and son duo who were, really sort of proud to share that moment with his son. And we met several pairs of people who were like that, and I think that's interesting to note, because often when we talk about the conservative movement and we talk about these things, that they're often portrayed as just older people, and people are like, oh, those people, that's just old people who have old thinking. But there was children there with their parents defending democracy as they thought. And I think that's significant. We talked to this 15-year-old there's one of the several children that we interviewed in front of the Capitol. We see him, and Chris is talking to them. Chris was going up to some of these kids and being like, "Hey, I want to make sure you're not doing anything too dangerous that day," which was.
Yeah, and I'll just add, like you said, I mean, the diversity, it's kind of astounding, just all the different people. There were people that clearly were there and ready, like Chris, that had, vests and different equipment, safety equipment, but there were lots of people that were just, regular MAGA supporters that were there, people that were all range of well-dressed and,
Yeah, we saw people with suit and tie and, loafers, like they were going to the office. We saw, women as also sort of well-dressed women who seemed like they were, going to work for the day, who were there as well, in addition to the people who had tactical gear on. So it was such a mix of different types of people. It was really kind of fascinating. We had reached out to some contacts trying to get information on the police's thinking, but we were never able to get that information. It was all planned in public. We try to show in the film the sort of public chorus that was beating the drum of Storm the Capitol. And we know that law enforcement watches the same news, reads the same websites, is part of the same social media groups on Facebook and other places. So we feel pretty confident that law enforcement also knew what the intention was that day, but their response was tepid, to say the least. And there's a lot of finger pointing by different sort of politicians, but the everyday law enforcement knew what was happening. So I think it's notable that the response was what it was. It's a troubling sign that this event that was largely planned in public did not warrant the level of police support, police presence to completely prevent any authorized people from entering the Capitol grounds. You could imagine that if this was a protest by a different type of group, they might have had a very different response. And so that's worth considering. I think it's good that that there weren't more deaths that day. Several people did die as a result of the riot and the response. It's really amazing that more people didn't die. So I think it's good for liberal democracy in that regard that more people died. Certainly that's not a solace for Ashley Babbitt's mother or for any of the families of any of the police officers or other participants in the insurrection who did lose their life that day. But it seems like a miracle that more people didn't die.
Yeah, I think both that, and I think it's also a search for belonging and community as well. So I think some of the expression of it is aggressiveness, but I think ultimately it's men that feel isolated and are looking for something.
Yeah, looking for home, looking for community. I feel like in the West in particular, we're experiencing a crisis of masculinity, where the definition of what it means to be a man is in flux. It's changing. Society is changing, and people are struggling to figure out what that means and what it means to be a man in this century and in this moment. And some people are acting in ways that harms other people. Well, I think it's going to be a close election. If the United States was a foreign country, then the U.S. State Department would probably issue travel advisories for the United States. I think, there's many people who feel like Biden was and is an illegitimate president. And so they feel deeply aggrieved and deeply frustrated and are ready, willing, and able to act out again to sort of save their country as they characterize it. I think this time it might be more intense and potentially violent in different ways than it was last time.
Yeah, I think no matter what happens in the election, this is, political violence, and the state of our country is something we're not going to run away from. And so we feel like the film will be useful long after the election, just because, these are issues that we're going to have to deal with for a long time.
We've reached a point in the United States where some political parties no longer see their political opponents as legitimate partners in governance. So there's no conversation. There's no possibility of any amount of compromise. And ultimately, any relationship, whether it's your friends, whether it's a marriage especially, or whether it's making decisions around how a community allocates its resources to support the interests of that community, compromises have to be made. And currently in the United States of America, the two political parties seem increasingly unwilling to compromise with each other because they don't see their opposition as legitimate. And that's a troubling point for liberal democracies to reach, because without that, how do you govern? And in the history of the 20th and 21st century, that is a precondition of increased sectarian violence. Yeah, it's, the United States has a very particular political system in that the two major parties have created a system of laws and rules over the last 200 years that makes it virtually impossible for any other party to enter the fray and enter the conversation. So competing ideas for governance and how the country should be happens within these parties. And the case with the Republican Party in this particular moment is that the right wing of that party, the militant wing of that party, is now the primary force animating conservatism in general and the Republican Party specifically. And that is a very unique situation within our history. And from their perspective, they would argue that the communists have overtaken the Democratic Party and that they are bent on destroying America. And it's hard to have any sort of common middle ground between those two ideas. So it's hard to imagine anybody coming together to find a solution anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, so we're focusing very much on getting the film out into as many audiences as possible. We have about 25 film festivals just in this month leading up through the election. We also, in the last year, we started an apprenticeship program for emerging artists, underrepresented artists, which was really satisfying to help try to nurture the next generation of artists that are trying to make films like this. And we're in projects in development as well. I think, for me, it's curiosity. So there's just, I think what was interesting about doing this film, I didn't necessarily think I was going to join Michael on this film at the beginning, but it was just such an amazing vision that he had for the project. And just the second I went on one of the first shoots, there was a curiosity to try to learn and understand. I think, we were talking about the divisions in America. And when I think about it, like one of the most poignant moments, which we actually didn't get to film, but it was Chris's sentencing, where we, just witnessed the judge give him a 12-year sentence. And his dad came up and testified on his behalf and, talked about how he has one daughter that's, a liberal Democrat. And then on the other side, he has Chris, and, he doesn't agree with what Chris is doing, but it's his son. And so he very much to me represents America and this kind of predicament that we're in. And so, I think many of us are trying to figure out how to move forward. Right. And so for me, it was this intense curiosity to try to understand who are these people and why, might they think what they think?
Yeah, maybe the reason we work together is because I'm also driven by just this intense curiosity for why people do the things that they do. But I'm particularly interested in social movements and in communities and the ways that groups of people come together to try to change their community in one way or another. It's absolutely fascinating to me how that happens. As individuals, I think we all have a story, a myth that we construct about who we are, what we are, and what we want. And it's always fascinating to sit with people and sort of understand those myths that they construct about themselves. And I don't mean myths in any sort of negative way. It's a completely sort of healthy way that we create stories that we tell about ourselves, and we choose to select certain things for those stories based on what we value and what we aspire to. And so that fascinates me about people. So I love being able to have the privilege to go to places I would never otherwise go and talk to people I would never otherwise have the opportunity to talk to better understand who they are and what they're about. And I think that's why I love making documentaries, because it affords me to do the things that maybe other people don't have the opportunity to do. It affords me the opportunity to do the things that I don't think that other people have the opportunity to do. But if I can go and talk to somebody and better understand what's happening in this community, and then bring that to other people, that's very satisfying.